Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Authors on the Air. I'm James Latwell, your host. We're part of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. And we have something really special today. We've got two authors, two fantastic authors who also happen to be some of my favorite people on the planet. We have Elena Taylor and Tessa Wegert. So, welcome, guys.
Thank you so
Hi.
much, Jim. And great to see you and hear you, Elena.
Yeah, and ditto, James. Right back at you.
Back at you. What's really fun about today's session is you both have new books out. And they have so many common threads and themes that I think it's going to be fun to really kind of dig into that. I mean, Elena, your book, Cold World, just came out.
Yeah.
And Tessa, A Coldest Case, I think comes out this week. So it's like there's a lot of themes here we can draw from. So let's jump in, and we'll start with Tessa. I mean, the setting in your books, all of them, but this one in particular, I mean, it really brings the reader to a very unique place. I mean, it says it right in the title. It's cold. So how did you come up with this particular location?
Yeah, I could talk about the setting for this book and this series honestly all day, so I won't do that. But I will say that having grown up in Quebec in Canada, I'm very, very familiar with extreme cold conditions. And I always wanted to incorporate that into a book. And this was the opportunity to do it because I found out about a real place in the Thousand Islands called Grindstone Island, where a little community of usually it's about 8 to 10 people overwinter all year long. And it's very remote. And if the river freezes over, it's very difficult to get back and forth to the mainland. So I decided that I was going to create a fictional version of this island. And of course, set the story in winter to make it as treacherous and precarious for these characters as I possibly could. So this book is really about a group of a very small community of people who live on the island. And two of them are newcomers, and they are young Instagram influencers that decide to come and spend a year on the island and document their experience kind of living in the wild. And come February, things go awry. One of them goes missing on an ice fishing expedition. There are a lot of secrets among the locals, a lot of secrets in the area, and things kind of just snowball. Sorry for the pun from there.
No, I mean, that's a hardy group to overwinter in a place like that. I mean, people really do that up there.
Yeah, they really do. And I had the opportunity to interview a gentleman who has done it many, many years with and without his wife in tow. And so he was able to tell me just some of the challenges that he faced and that they both faced while they were there. And it's interesting that you would use the word hardy, because that's a word that I use to describe this community in the book as well, the fictional characters, but also it's very true of the real life individuals who do this, because you have to, I think, have a certain grit to you to be able to pull something like that off, because it's kind of like being in survivalist mode, and everyone relies so much on each other in that community. And so that plays a big part in this book too, is the tight-knit community of residents that have done this for many, many years. And then, how that balances with the newcomers, the kind of interlopers, and where they fit into this whole scenario.
Yeah. Now, Elena, I mean, in your book, Bet Rivers is up to her snowmobile in winter. I mean, it's right there. How did you kind of throw her into that situation? What was your thinking of that setting?
I have a real world experience. So when I was writing this book, I was living in North Bend, Washington, which a lot of people may recognize from TV. It is where Twin Peaks was filmed, right? So the Snoqualmie Valley and North Bend and Snoqualmie is where Twin Peaks was filmed. And so it's up in the mountains, but typically we would get maybe a couple inches of snow in a single snowstorm, right? Some years wouldn't get any snow at all. So it was like we would get snow, but not a big deal. So one year we had 8 weeks of nonstop snow. At one point I had almost 4 feet in front of my house in a community with one snowplow. So yeah. So, and I was thinking about, as Tessa was talking, like it really had that island feel to it. My road, I lived on a dead end road. I was on a dead end road off off a small road, off a main road on the far side of the river. Like I literally could not get to town. And my street, my little community, my little island, like my neighbors had to dig me out with a tractor. My husband was traveling at the time. So when it started, he couldn't get home. So, and it was amazing. I would come out and I'd be like, well, the snow's coming down again. Well, the snow's coming down again. Oh, look, the snow. And obviously for me, I wasn't solving a murder. It's a very benign community. Like I wasn't in any kind of danger. But when I started writing the second in this Sheriff Bet River series, I was really thinking, what if I wouldn't have danger here, where I literally can't even walk to town at this point because it's so far, buried. What if I needed to find evidence in 3.5 feet of snow? I have pictures from it with, 3 feet on top a trash can. Like I couldn't open my, trash can kind of thing.
Wow.
And I thought, what would you do if you had to look for clues that a murder had left behind? And so that, just to use Tessa's term, snowballed into making that almost a character that Sheriff Bet Rivers had to fight. And the first book is set in the fall. I knew I wanted it to be set in the winter, and I wanted the environment to really have changed. And obviously it has. We literally had to be dug out by the National Guard, and my road in wasn't even on the list. So, I mean, we were out there with tractors and trucks and to get the road cleared. It was fabulous for me, but it would be awful if you were trying to solve a murder.
I can imagine. I mean, I live probably 50 miles from where the Donner Party, did their thing. But where I'm at now, if we get an inch a year, it's a tragedy, and everybody doesn't know how to act. But it's crazy. Now Tessa, by putting your story on this island and these overwinter folks, you've almost created kind of like a closed circle story where there's a killer living among us.
Right.
What was your thinking on that, and how did that kind of influence what Shayna went through?
Yeah, that was very intentional, because the first book in the series, which is called Death in the Family, had a very similar vibe. It's a locked room mystery set on a remote private island with a much different group of individuals, largely all members of the same family, but still had that same closed circle of suspects kind of mood and tone to it and structure to it. And because for now, I won't say forever, but for now, this is the final book in the Shayna Merchant series, because I'm moving on to a new series for a little while, which I'm happy to talk about as well. I wanted to kind of cap things off and come full circle in a way to have this feel in some ways like the very first book. There are, of course, as I said, aspects of it that are very, very different. What's primarily different about this book is that it flashes back and forth between really two timelines. So you have the current case that senior investigator Shayna Merchant, who's with the New York State Police, is investigating on this island. But at the same time, she revisits a cold case from her time prior to moving to the Thousand Islands, when she lived in New York City and worked for the NYPD. So there's a little back and forth there. Aspects of the current case that she's working remind her of things involving the cold case. She's able to investigate both kind of at the same time, and there's some overlap there. And it allows her to kind of resolve some of the issues from her past as well that have been carried throughout the entire series and touched on in various books, specifically involving this serial killer named Blake Bram, who has been a big adversary, character for her throughout all of the books in the series. So yeah, I do have this closed circle of suspects because there's no one else around. You can't get on the island. You can't get off. You're dealing with a murder. And of course the mystery surrounding that. And so it's, that was one of the aspects of the book that I most enjoyed writing. And I think that's because I am such a fan of the locked room mystery, the closed circle mystery. It's just such a classic, from the golden age of detective fiction. And I'm always drawn to those types of stories. So it's always fun to try your hand at something that you really admire, watching other people pull off.
No, it was a fun read. I think you did a great job at it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Now, Elena, you're very similar. I mean, Bet's cut off. no help is coming in. Who can she trust in town?
Yeah.
I mean, this because somebody's lurking there that's a little nefarious.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty slim. Like her list of who she can trust is pretty slim. But one of the things I enjoyed playing with was sort of similar to what Tessa was saying about the locked room, is that her list of suspects is much bigger. Even though it's a small town, it is a lot more people that could potentially be the problem, including people she doesn't even know are there. But it also means if she can't bring anyone in, the killer can't get out. And so I liked playing with this idea that as much as she's going to face a lot more adversary, to track down this killer because her clues are getting buried and all of that, she also is sort of aware he hasn't gotten out. Like, cars can't get out. The road is closed. It's ringed with mountains. For any of you who are not familiar with the Pacific Northwest, our mountains are valley mountain. You're not walking out of this valley, right? Like it just physically isn't possible. You're not walking out of there. And with the degree of the storm and the weather, you're going to die of hypothermia. So she's confident that he's as stuck as she is. So there's this race, right? Of if the roads open up, I can get help him, but this person can get out. And so I really enjoyed playing with that idea of that trapped, even though it's a much sort of larger group of people. Tessa, I really hope there are more Shana Merchant novels, but I'm also super excited about your new series. So I think Jim's probably going to touch on it, but I'm excited to hear about it as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I will just quickly say that Shana is not gone. She plays a part in this new series. For sure, readers are going to get some time with her, but through a different lens, because it's from multiple points of view versus just from her point of view and her as the narrator. So it'll be a little bit of a departure, but hopefully in a fun and fresh and exciting way.
I love that. Very Tana French. Yeah. It feels very Tana French to me.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, in a good way, in a really good way.
Yeah, in a very good way. Now, both of you write, extremely strong female characters, in Bet Rivers and Shana Merchant. But what qualities and characteristics did you bring to the page to make them, come off that way? And Tessa, we'll start with you and Shana.
Yeah, I love that question because I've read the Sheriff Bet Rivers books, and I completely agree. I find that she and Shana have a very similar outlook on life and a similar kind of, again, I used the word grit earlier, but I think it really applies to them both as well. Like they're both very competent but complex investigators, I would say. And so with Shana, what aspects that I have what I wanted to do when I created her as a character is come up with someone who did have that competence and was very good at her job, very single-minded focus kind of in her investigative methods. But I wanted to give her some nuance and emotional flavor as well. And so I created this backstory to her that involved this abduction experience and this PTSD that has been something that she struggles with throughout the entire series, to kind of give me an opportunity to evolve her as a character, not only as an investigator, and with every new case that she works on, she learns something new, she makes mistakes, but then she overcomes, challenges and obstacles and becomes a better detective as a result. But she's also evolving as a human with every new book. And then with this book, The Coldest Case, it's in a way her biggest challenge yet, because of where she is in her personal life. That puts her in kind of a vulnerable position. I don't want to say too much without spoiling, but she's there's a major life change going on for her now, and that very much impacts the way that she investigates. She's not even really working to the same level or capacity that she has been at the start of this book. But because the case feels very personal to her in a lot of ways, she gets involved. And so, that's been something that I wanted to really focus on from book to book, is her evolution as a character, and then hopefully guide the readers along so that with every new story and mystery, they get a better sense of who she is and who she's becoming.
No, that's great. And Elena, how about Bet? What did you bring to her?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. I think, also backstory in that her father and his father and his father, all the way back to the origins of the town, have always been the sheriff of this small mountain community. And so she was brought up with an expectation that that was what she would be. And gender wasn't an issue. It wasn't a question because she was the person in line. So she's a person who has been brought up with an expectation of who she is that isn't related to gender.
Hmm.
But I also have built in, so she, before book one even starts, so book one starts, she's come back into town, but she went off to Los Angeles to break away from her father, to create her own identity, to have sort of a broader experience in law enforcement than just being sheriff of a small town. And she, of course, faces discrimination because you do. That is how the world is, right? And so there are times where she is grappling with an understanding of a discrimination that she did not experience in the molding of her personality. So I like to play with the idea that she's very aware of it. She knows that that's there, even in her own community. You know, she knows that that's built in about, you know, people wondering, can she handle it as a woman? And she doesn't doubt in terms of her building of herself, but she's new to the job. She didn't expect to be sheriff so soon. She anticipated years of you know, experience. So her questions for herself are, is she capable as a law enforcement officer, not because of her gender? And so I like sort of playing with that idea of her having an internal fortitude, but aware of external sort of expectations. And I found that sort of really fun to kind of play with. And she's big and strong and smart and capable and fearless and all those things that any law enforcement officer sort of has to be. So she's grappling with the, well, of course, people see me this way, but I don't. I'm not worried about, you know, gender being problematic.
No, I love both of these characters, and the way, you know, you both just described them. There's so much, you know, trauma and backstory that they both,
Yeah.
you know, absorbed and gone through, that it can't help but come out, you know, in the story. And I think, yeah, they're both fantastic characters, and
Yay.
fun to read and fun to
Thanks, Jim.
fun to come back to.
That's nice to
Um,
hear.
yeah, no, but
It is.
but but that means they're not completely, you know, perfect people. They have some troubles, and one of the
Yeah.
troubles is their relationships are kind of rocky. What is it about, you know, being a strong woman, maybe a strong woman in law enforcement, that might drive some of these relationships kind of off the rails? And Tessa, we'll start with you and Shane.
Yeah. Oof, so many things, especially for her, because her relationship, her romantic relationship, is with someone who, for all intents and purposes, is her partner. So her partner in law enforcement, her partner with the New York State Police Bureau of Criminal Investigation. So going into the series, they butt heads in a lot of ways. They don't necessarily see eye to eye. They don't come from the same background at all. Tim Wellington, who is, by the time you reach this book, he is her husband. He is a small town boy, and she is from a small town as well in Vermont, but they have very different life experiences because he didn't leave. He stayed in the Thousand Islands, and he has, you know, a lot of compassion for the residents and a lot of love for his hometown and for the region. But that also makes him, I think, naive in a lot of ways, and he's not necessarily willing to see the faults and, you know, the potential violence kind of sometimes simmering below the surface. He just kind of has blinders on when it comes to all of that. Whereas Shayna, who has had this traumatic experience, who has lived in New York City, who has worked for the NYPD, she's coming at it from a very different place. And she's very jaded and skeptical about things when she arrives. And so over the course of the series, you see that between the two of them evolve as their relationship evolves, as they get to know each other better. it was really fun for me to think about how their personalities and their outlooks on life would influence each other and then influence the way that they investigate too, because for the most part, they work together on all of the investigations. In the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, there are no actual partners, but there are people who, like, technically, but there are people who spend more time with each other than others. And it's a very small region and community, so there just aren't that many senior investigators. So that was one of the things that was really fun for me to explore, was thinking about how with each new book in the series, each investigation would unfold and what they would be bringing, you know, individually to the case, and then how their own individual expertise would then move them, you know, unfold the mystery and move the investigation forward. And I don't know about you, Elena, but I found that to be a tricky thing, because you do need to think so much about how personal relationships impact things. And that's something else that I think that our characters really have in common, is they do have this vulnerable side to them, right? And I think it's just realistic, because I don't know, you know, nobody who works in law enforcement can completely shut off what's happening in their personal lives. And I've always personally been very interested in knowing how they do manage to stay professional and, you know, not have issues like confirmation bias, which maybe to some extent is inevitable. But yeah, the personal relationships definitely play a part. Would you say so too, Elena?
Yeah, I totally agree. And to start with Beth, to talking about her relationship with her father, you know, the flip side of what we were talking about before with gender, her father brings her up with that expectation, but he also can't ever know what it is to be her, which is a woman in that position. And one of the things that she grapples with in the second book is that she isn't a sheriff like her father was. But simultaneously, her mentor in Los Angeles had been a Latina woman who, you know, she was looking to for her mentorship and helped her understand how to navigate as a woman. But that mentor doesn't know what it is to be a single sheriff in a small community. So she has these two, you know, very important relationships to developing her and her place in the world. And neither one of them are understanding both halves, right? So she thinks about her father's advice and how her father was, and thinks, well, I'm not him and I can't be like him. I don't think like him. I have different reactions. I have different, you know, experiences. And then she looks to her mentor in Southern California and thinks, well, sure, but she was in, you know, the Los Angeles Police Department with all these resources that I don't have. I'm sort of me and you know, my single deputy, right? And so her part of her grappling in the world with these relationships is also like finding they're adding to her who she is in the world, right? Because she's young enough and new enough in the job to still be working on it. And then on the romantic side, it's so tricky, I think, for strong women in any position, right, regardless of what their career is, that oftentimes, you know, if you're talking about a straight relationship and you have straight women and straight men come in and go, wow, it is so sexy that you're so strong, until they're your boyfriend. And then it's threatening. Like I've seen that happen for friends of mine, and I've had it happen in my own life. Luckily, I'm now married to a guy who's like, you know, he is who he is. He is not worried about having me be who I am. Like, it's fine. But I have seen so often where men are attracted to strong women until it becomes threatening to them in some way because of an expectation about the dynamic in the relationship. And so it was fun. It's fun, I think, to create women who are able to say, my job is as important to me as your job is to you. And you don't get to step on me because, you know, if I'm putting the job first, or, you know, how to navigate that sort of relationship. So I think it's sort of interesting to think about the partner side of things, going, who is he that he can handle this relationship where she is as strong as he is. And so that, I think, and you deal with that too, in that your characters, you know, like there's that give and take of who they are in their professional life and what they bring to the table as a relationship. So, I mean, you do that too. You know, was that something super conscious when you were building their relationship?
Yeah, similar to what you're describing, I would say, yeah, because part of it is, we have to get inside the characters' heads and think about what those characters expect from the relationship once it's moved into that romantic realm. And then how does that jibe with what's actually happening, right? And of course, along the way, you got to throw in some complicated situations.
Exactly.
So it can't all be just, arrows and hearts and rainbows and whatever. And meaning like Cupid's arrows, you know what I mean? Actual arrows.
Yeah.
So for example, in Devil's at the Door, which is the book prior to the Coldest case, things are a little rocky in their relationship, and I felt like at some point I would have to look at what would happen between them if that was the case, and if maybe things weren't going so smoothly. And I think the reality is, for anybody working in such a high pressure, high intensity career, that's going to have an impact on all of your personal relationships, right? And then, of course, family relationships, and even the way that these characters engage with witnesses and question people in the community. And it's all this interconnected kind of interwoven web of dynamics, right? Relationship dynamics and human dynamics. It's so fascinating. And especially, I would say, in a mystery and thriller, because there's so much potential fodder to work with there when you're writing. And Jim, you do a terrific job of this too. Your characters are always so deep, so complex, so multi-layered. The relationships that they have on the page are always like very much like what we're describing, right? Just so so like intriguing and not at all what you see on the surface. You have to really kind of dig as a reader into what's really going on.
Thank you for that.
And Jim, your female characters, I love, similar to what we're talking about, of that they're strong and powerful, but also very human, and they do have flaws and they do have fears and they do have, things that are problematic. And I just think that the more we create these rounded characters, like we remember characters even more than plot, I think, as readers. And that
I agree.
It's why we follow series and we engage with those characters. And so I love how genuine yours are, Jim.
Oh, thanks. Well, speaking of characters, I'd like to see a scene someday where Bet and Shayna are in the same room together.
Wouldn't that be fun? We should do a short story.
So
we'd have to decide, do they meet in one or the other community, or are they like in a completely different location? Like
that was going to be my question too. Who's going on a road trip?
Right?
Who's going on a road trip? Right.
Because we're on opposite sides of the country. So
let's just say this is in a neutral territory and there's something going on. But I mean, Tessa, what would Shayna ask Bet? What would be one of the first things she'd ask Bet?
Oh gosh, she would probably ask Bet something about the extent to which the way that her father worked influences her, because her father does play such a large role in her life, and has in the past, and has, impacted her and shaped her as an individual and as a character. So I would probably want to know more about that, especially since Shayna's parents don't work at all in law enforcement. Like, they're just not at all involved in that world or in that field. So I think she'd probably be very interested to know how, similar to what you were saying earlier, Elena, but how, her father's approach and techniques prior to her taking over as sheriff, how that influenced the way that she approached situations that she was dealing with in town.
Yeah.
Sure. What about Bet? What would be one of the first things she
Bet would totally look to Shayna as a mentor, because she has so much more experience. She's solved so many more crimes, and they're not that different in age, but just her background. Bet has solved her first homicide in All We Buried. Right. And so she would absolutely look to her, and I think probably be most interested in like her procedure and how she thinks through things, and kind of how much does she trust her gut versus hard evidence, and I think those are the kinds of things she would definitely look to her as a mentor.
Got it.
I think they get
So
along really well.
I think they would too. I'm
Yeah.
ready to write that short story. I think we should do it.
I love it.
They meet at a conference, right? And then find a body.
Yeah, there we go. So yeah, Tessa, you touched on what's coming next for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, or is it still
Sure.
under wraps?
Yes, I absolutely can. No, I can. So the book I'm working on now is the first book in a new series called the North Country Novels. And as I mentioned, those will all be set in the Thousand Islands as well, but written from multiple points of view. So a lot of the same characters that readers of any of the Shayna books will know, including Sheriff Maureen McIntyre, who plays a big role. She's a very good friend of Shayna Merchant's, including Tim Wellington, who is now, of course, Shayna's husband, and even some family members of theirs who you haven't gotten to meet yet will have a kind of starring role, at least in this first book. And then Shayna will play a part because she's just on the, periphery in these investigations. And so there will be some scenes where there are conversations taking place between some of these, to this point, secondary characters that now are getting brought to the fore. And so you will get to see, as I think I said, Shayna through a bit of a different lens, from a different point of view, the point of view of some of her colleagues and then other people within the community, which is proving to be really fun because she has kind of a not so stellar, I would say, reputation in the community.
Right.
Her arrival in the community has caused some problems over the years. So to be able to write, what others in that area think of her, what her neighbors really truly think of her, versus everything up until now has been solely through her own eyes and from Shayna's point of view, that's proven to be really fun and interesting for me. So the first book will be out in late 2025.
Cool.
Oh, great. Wow,
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, congrats on that.
Thank you so much.
What's coming next for you, Elena?
Well, I am very, very, very hopeful that a third book in the Sheriff Bet Rivers series will be coming out. It's probably not a big surprise to listeners that it's going to depend a lot on how well a Cold World sells. So it is yes. I know, right? Well, buy that book. Show my publisher that another book is a good idea. And so that's sort of the biggest thing that I'm kind of waiting on right now, because the other thing that people may or may not know is that there's a huge lag time between a book coming out and knowing what the sales numbers are. And it's a combination of how royalties are set up. Publishers only have to let you know every 6 months. But it's also that the publisher doesn't even really know, because there's sort of that question of books have gone out to a bookstore and they may not get the numbers from the bookstore for 2 months. So there's always this lag built into the industry. And so even though the book came out in August, my agent and I are just now wondering, okay, are the sales strong enough for us to make this pitch? And so that's number one. And then I have a standalone suspense, completely unrelated to any of my previous books. It's not related to the Eddie Shoes books, which I read under Elena Hartwell. It's not related to Sheriff Bet Rivers, and it's not a police procedural. It is a suspense novel. And that same thing, it's out on sub, hoping it finds a home. So a little bit in flux over here in the Pacific Northwest.
That's the business, but you'll be fine. I mean, I'm looking forward to the next Bet Rivers.
Yay.
I am too. Yay. And the suspense you're describing. It's always good to have lots of irons in the fire too, right?
Yeah. I think we sort of have to, because we can love our publishers and love what we're doing, but also know that the industry is complicated, and and if things go sideways, you can always right the ship and move in a new direction. You're never trapped in a snowstorm like our characters.
This is true. Yeah. So we're gonna end on something we call 3 quick hits. Tessa's played this once before, but I want to put you in your character's frame of mind. And it'll be just 3 quick questions. And Elena, we'll start with you.
Okay.
What's Bet's favorite cocktail, or what does she like to drink?
Oh, she's a vodka girl.
And Tessa, how about Shayna?
She drinks beer, which I don't, but she's a vodka girl.
Shayna has been drinking gin lately. There's a new bar that has opened up in town that has this like really nice some gin cocktails with juniper berries that she's been checking out. So, but well, I won't say too much, but there may be reasons in the Coldest case why she can't be drinking too much.
This is true.
Oh,
Yes. Dun, dun, dun. So, Elena, back to you and Beth. What's her favorite music? What does she listen to?
oh, alt bluegrass is what she sort of grew up on. And in the first book, there's a lot more music in it. But she is very strong in that bluegrass, alt bluegrass, far more than country, like truly the alt bluegrass. And it's what she was brought up with. The community gets together and plays music. She's always been a singer. Her father was a singer. And so music is incredibly important. And Cold, Cold World is the title of a song. And so, yeah, that it is. It's go look it up. It's a fantastic song. It's very much something that Bette would sing.
Yep. Cool. Okay. I love that.
Yep. And how about?
Yeah, with Shayna, honestly, I haven't talked too much about what type of music she listens to, but in my head, she enjoys a lot of 80s kind of alternative music. And I did create Spotify playlists for every one of the books so far that include some of the songs that I imagine she would enjoy and listen to. And then, of course, other songs that I just feel like atmospherically are a good fit for the individual books. So, yeah, but it is fun to think about those aspects of a character, right? And the more that you understand the character, the more I think that it helps us write them moving forward.
True. And then finally, Elena, Bette, what's her greatest fear?
Failure to protect her community.
Yeah, I can see that in her.
Yeah.
Tessa, Shayna, what's Shayna's greatest fear?
I would say pretty close to the same thing. In the Coldest case, she has some other fears related to her personal safety and her husband's personal safety as well. But yeah, overall, generally speaking, I would say same thing. She doesn't want to let her community down. There aren't a lot of people kind of advocating for this small little area all the way up at the border of Canada. So she feels like a lot of pressure to, do what she can to protect them.
Right.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed talking with you guys. Folks, I hope you get out and check both of these books out. Elena Hartwell, A Cold, Cold World, and Tessa Wegert, The Coldest Case. You're going to love them both. They're fantastic authors, fantastic books, and I hope you have a chance to check it out. So thanks for spending some time with us, guys.
Oh, it's been fantastic. Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Great to chat with you both.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.